What if Palpatine countered Jedi Reclamation? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Obi-Wan Kenobi freezes. Something is wrong. The Force screams a warning he cannot ignore. Around him, 12 surviving Jedi stand ready. They breach the temple. They disabled the alarms. For the first time since Order 66, hope seemed possible. But now that hope turns to ice in his veins. Because he recognizes this feeling, this cold, this darkness. He felt it once before, hiding behind a Chancellor's smile. And across the galaxy, Emperor Palpatine opens his yellow eyes. His lips curl into a smile. They came, just as I foresaw. The Jedi think they are reclaiming their home. They think they are rescuing the younglings Palpatine kept alive as bait. They think they have outsmarted the Empire. They are wrong. Every step of their plan was anticipated. Every move was predicted. Every hope was weaponized against them. Tonight, the last Jedi will learn what happens when you walk into a trap designed by the most powerful Sith Lord in 1,000 years. Tonight, Palpatine doesn't just defeat them. He destroys everything they believe in. 3 weeks earlier, the galaxy is still reeling from the sudden transformation of the Republic into the Galactic Empire. On Coruscant, Imperial banners hang from every building. Stormtroopers patrol streets that once welcomed Jedi peacekeepers. The temple itself stands dark and silent, a tomb for those who fell within its walls. But in the shadows, in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, survivors hide and wait. On the swamp world of Dagobah, Master Yoda meditates in exile, his connection to the Force strained by the overwhelming darkness that now blankets everything. On Tatooine, Obi-Wan watches over a moisture farm from a distance, his heart heavy with the weight of his failure. On Felucia, Master Shakti tends to her wounds and grieves for her fallen comrades. On Kashyyyk, Quinlan Vos fights alongside Wookiee resistance cells, his face scarred from the betrayal of clones he once trusted. Scattered across 1,000 worlds, the Jedi who survived Order 66 have gone to ground. They have disconnected from each other, fearful that any communication might be tracked, might bring the Empire's wrath down upon them. They have accepted that the Jedi Order is finished, that all they can do now is survive and wait for a future that may never come. But then the messages begin to arrive. Obi-Wan receives the first one through a coded frequency that only Jedi know. It comes in fragments, broken and distorted, but the voice is unmistakable. This is Shakti. I know you're out there. I know others survived. We cannot let fear keep us apart forever. The Empire grows stronger every day while we hide in shadows. We must act. Obi-Wan listens to the message 3 times before responding. His first instinct is to warn her, to tell her that communication is dangerous, that Palpatine surely has agents monitoring every frequency. But something in her voice stops him. It is not desperation, it is determination. And despite everything, despite the logical part of his mind screaming at him to stay hidden, Obi-Wan finds himself responding. More messages follow. From Quinlan Vos on Kashyyyk. From the Jedi Knight Bultar Swan, who escaped the temple massacre by playing dead beneath a pile of younglings she could not save. From others whose names Obi-Wan recognizes from the war, Jedi he fought beside, Jedi he thought were dead. The network grows slowly, carefully, each new connection a risk, each new voice a spark of hope in an ocean of darkness. Then comes the message that changes everything. It arrives through Bail Organa, one of the few allies the surviving Jedi can still trust. The senator from Alderaan has been working within the new Imperial Senate, maintaining appearances while secretly gathering intelligence. What he tells them makes Obi-Wan's blood run cold. There are younglings alive in the temple, Palpatine didn't kill them all. He's keeping them there, training them, twisting them to serve the Empire. Obi-Wan shares this intelligence with the others through their coded network. The response is immediate and unanimous. They cannot leave those children to be corrupted. The younglings represent everything the Jedi once stood for, everything they might one day become again. If there is any chance to save them, they must take it. But there is more to Organa's intelligence. The temple is lightly guarded. Most of the Empire's forces are focused on consolidating control in the Outer Rim, crushing resistance before it can organize. The Emperor himself has been absent from Coruscant for days, overseeing military operations. If they are going to strike, now is the time. Obi-Wan wants to believe it. He wants to believe that the Force has finally given them an opportunity, that their patience is being rewarded. But something gnaws at him, a whisper of doubt that he cannot quite silence. This seems too convenient, too perfect. He raises his concerns during their clandestine meeting on the neutral world of Polis Massa, the same medical facility where Padme drew her last breath. We must be cautious. Palpatine is not a fool. He has outmaneuvered us at every turn. If this is a trap, we could lose everything. Shaak Ti steps forward, her elegant features hardened by weeks of survival. We have already lost everything, Obi-Wan. The Order is destroyed. Our friends are dead. The Republic we swore to protect has become the very tyranny we feared. What more can we lose? Our lives. Obi-Wan replies quietly, and with them, any hope of one day rebuilding what was lost. Quinlan Vos, his tattoos stark against his pale skin, crosses his arms. I've spent weeks fighting in the shadows. Sabotage, assassination, hit and run attacks that accomplished nothing. The Empire barely notices. If we want to make a real difference, we need to do something big. Something that shows the galaxy the Jedi aren't dead. Something that gives people hope. The debate continues for hours. Some argue for caution, for waiting until they have more intelligence, more resources, more certainty. Others insist that waiting only gives the Empire more time to consolidate, more time to find them, more time to corrupt those younglings beyond saving. In the end, it is Bultar Swan who speaks the words that decide them. When I lay beneath those bodies, she says, her voice barely above a whisper, when I felt their blood seeping into my robes and heard the clones marching past, I made a promise. I promised that if I survived, I would not let their deaths mean nothing. I would not hide forever while the darkness consumed everything we built. She looks around at the gathered Jedi, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Maybe this is a trap. Maybe we're all going to die. But at least we'll die fighting. At least we'll die as Jedi. The vote is unanimous. They will attempt the reclamation of the Jedi Temple. But as the surviving Jedi begin their planning, another meeting takes place far across the galaxy. Aboard the Star Destroyer Executor, Emperor Palpatine sits upon his throne, his yellow eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Before him kneels the broken form of Darth Vader, his breathing apparatus hissing rhythmically in the silence. They have taken the bait, my apprentice. The Jedi survivors are gathering. They believe they can reclaim their precious temple, rescue their precious younglings. Vader's vocoder crackles as he speaks. How many have revealed themselves, Master? Enough. Palpatine's lips curl into a cruel smile. Kenobi? The Togruta? Shaak Ti? The Kifar? Quinlan Vos? Others of lesser importance. They have been in communication for weeks, building their little network, believing they were being clever. Vader's mechanical hands clench into fists at the mention of Kenobi's name. The hatred radiates off him in waves, filling the Force with dark energy that Palpatine savors like fine wine. You shall have your revenge, Lord Vader. But patience. We must ensure that this time, there are no survivors. No one to flee into the shadows and rebuild. This time, we will destroy the Jedi completely. Palpatine rises from his throne and moves to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. He has been planning this moment since before Order 66. He knew that some Jedi would survive the initial purge. He knew that eventually their hope would overcome their fear and they would attempt some grand gesture of defiance. And he knew that when they did, he would be ready. The intelligence about the younglings was planted carefully through channels that would eventually reach Senator Organa. The information about the reduced security was allowed to leak through a dozen different sources, each confirming the others, creating a web of false confidence. Even the Emperor's absence from Coruscant was engineered, a piece of theater designed to make the Jedi believe the time was right. But there are no younglings in the temple. Those children were taken to a facility in the deep core weeks ago, where the Inquisitorius program is transforming them into hunters of their former brothers and sisters. What waits in the temple is something far worse. Lord Vader, you will take the Inquisitors and prepare the welcome our guests deserve. And when they arrive, you will remind Kenobi why he should have killed you on Mustafar. Vader rises, his cape swirling behind him. It will be done, my master. But the trap is not merely military. Palpatine understands that destroying the Jedi physically is only part of the victory. He must also destroy them ideologically, erase any sympathy the galaxy might still hold for them, transform them in the public mind from heroes into villains. To that end, he has prepared a second phase of his plan, one that will unfold across the holonet for all the galaxy to see. The Jedi attack on the temple will be broadcast live, carefully edited to show the Jedi as terrorists, as the aggressors, as threats to the peace and stability that the Empire has brought. Any collateral damage will be blamed on them. Any Imperial casualties will become martyrs. And when the dust settles, Palpatine will use the attack as justification for dissolving the Imperial Senate entirely, removing the last vestige of democratic oversight and cementing his absolute power. It is elegant. It is efficient. It is exactly what he has done his entire life, turning his enemies' virtues against them, transforming hope into despair, victory into defeat. The Jedi believe they are fighting to save their order. In truth, they are helping him destroy everything they ever stood for. 2 weeks later, the plan is ready. The surviving Jedi have gathered on Alderaan, hidden in the mountains outside Aldera, where Bail Organa has provided them sanctuary. They number 18 in total, not all of them full knights, some merely Padawans who escaped the purge through luck or the sacrifice of their masters. But they are determined. They have trained together, planned together, found strength in each other's presence after weeks of isolation. Obi-Wan addresses them on the eve of their departure. Tomorrow, we return to Coruscant. We return to the temple that was our home, the heart of our order for 1,000 generations. Many of us will not survive. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle over them. But this is not about survival. This is about showing the galaxy that the Jedi are not dead, that the light still burns in the darkness. If we succeed, we rescue our youngest and most vulnerable. If we fail, we die as Jedi on our feet, with our lightsabers in our hands. Either way, we do not go quietly. The plan is complex but achievable. They will infiltrate Coruscant in small groups, using a variety of disguises and forged credentials that Organa has provided. Once on the planet, they will converge on the temple from multiple directions. Quinlan Voss will lead a team to sabotage Imperial, communications, ensuring that reinforcements cannot be easily called. Shaak Ti will coordinate the extraction, preparing escape routes and vehicles. Obi-Wan will lead the main assault on the temple itself, breaching the entrance and fighting through to where the younglings are supposedly being held. If everything goes according to plan, they will be in and out within an hour, disappearing into the chaos before the Empire can respond in force. They have contingencies for a dozen different scenarios. What they do not have is a contingency for what actually awaits them. The night before the operation, Obi-Wan finds himself unable to sleep. He walks through the mountain fortress that Organa has provided, his boots echoing on the ancient stone. The other Jedi are resting, gathering their strength for what lies ahead. But Obi-Wan's mind will not be still. He thinks of all the ways this could go wrong, all the variables they cannot control. He thinks of Anakin, of the boy he trained, the man he failed. Somewhere out there, Anakin has become something else, something terrible. Obi-Wan has heard the rumors of the Emperor's enforcer, the monster in black armor. He knows in his heart who that monster must be. The thought fills him with a grief so profound it threatens to overwhelm him. Master Kenobi. Shaak Ti's voice comes from behind him. He turns to find her standing in the moonlight, her Togruta features serene despite the danger they face. You should be resting. So should you. She moves to stand beside him, gazing out at the stars. I find myself thinking of the younglings we failed to save, the ones who died in the temple. She pauses, and the ones who may still be alive, being twisted by the Empire. We will save them, Obi-Wan says. We have to. But even as he speaks the words, the doubt gnaws at him. Will they? Can they? Or are they walking into a trap that will destroy them all? Shaak Ti seems to sense his uncertainty. Whatever happens tomorrow, she says quietly, we do this because we must. Because we are Jedi. Because the alternative is to accept that the darkness has won. She turns to face him, her eyes bright with conviction. I would rather die fighting than live hiding. I would rather fail trying than succeed at nothing. Obi-Wan considers her words. She is right, of course. The decision to attempt the Reclamation was not made lightly. They all understood the risks. They all accepted them. To turn back now would be to betray everything they believe in. Very well, he says finally. Then let us make tomorrow count. Whatever the outcome, let us show the galaxy that the Jedi are not afraid. In another part of the fortress, Quinlan Vos is having a very different conversation. He sits with Bultar Swan, the two of them sharing a bottle of Alderaanian wine that Organa left for them. It seems inappropriate, drinking on the eve of battle. But Quinlan has never been one for propriety. Besides, he reasons, if they're going to die tomorrow, they might as well enjoy tonight. You're thinking too loudly, Bultar says, her voice slightly slurred. I can feel your anxiety from here. I'm not anxious, Quinlan lies. I'm cautious, there's a difference. She laughs, a sound that seems out of place given what they face. Quinlan Vos, cautious. That's a new one. He smiles despite himself. People change. War changes them. She sobers at that, her expression growing serious. Do you think we can really do this? Save the younglings? Strike a blow against the Empire? I don't know, Quinlan admits. But I know we have to try. Those children didn't choose to be born Force-sensitive. They didn't choose to be taken by the Jedi, trained in our ways. And they certainly didn't choose to be captured by the Empire. If there's any chance we can save them, we have to take it. Bultar nods slowly. I keep thinking about the ones I couldn't save. During Order 66. She stares into her wine, her eyes distant. I played dead, Quinlan. I lay beneath their bodies and listened to the clones march past. I could have fought. I could have tried to save some of them. But I was afraid. Quinlan reaches out and takes her hand. You survived. That's not nothing. If you had fought, you would have died, and you wouldn't be here now, ready to fight for those who still live. She looks up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. Do you really believe that? I have to, he says. Otherwise, what's the point? Across the galaxy, in the depths of the Executor, Darth Vader prepares for the coming battle. He stands in his meditation chamber, his helmet removed, the machinery that keeps him alive, humming softly in the darkness. He thinks of Obi-Wan. He thinks of the last time they faced each other, on the volcanic slopes of Mustafar. The pain of that day has never fully faded. The physical pain, yes, that is constant. A companion he has learned to live with. But the emotional pain, the sense of betrayal, of loss, of everything he might have been slipping away, that pain grows stronger with each passing day. You were my brother, Anakin. Obi-Wan's words echo in his mind, a torment that no amount of dark side power can silence. I loved you. Vader clenches his mechanical fists. Love. What did Obi-Wan know of love? He who stood by while the Council denied Anakin again and again. He who failed to see Palpatine's manipulation until it was too late. He who left Anakin burning on that riverbank, too cowardly to finish what he started. Tomorrow, Vader will have his revenge. Tomorrow, he will show Obi-Wan what happens to those who betray him. And when Kenobi lies dead at his feet, perhaps then the voices will finally stop. Perhaps then he will finally have peace. But deep within him, in a place he refuses to acknowledge, a small voice whispers that revenge will change nothing, that the pain will remain, that no amount of killing will fill the void where Anakin Skywalker used to be. He silences the voice with practiced ease. He has become very good at silencing inconvenient truths. Emperor Palpatine observes his apprentice through the Force, a smile playing at the corners of his withered lips. Vader is so predictable, so easily manipulated. His hatred for Kenobi is a leash that Palpatine holds with casual ease. As long as that hatred burns, Vader will never be a threat. He will be exactly what Palpatine made him, a weapon to be pointed at the Emperor's enemies. The Jedi survivors think they are being clever. They think their network is secure, their plans undetected. They do not realize that Palpatine has been watching them from the beginning, guiding them toward this moment with subtle manipulations of the Force. The intelligence about the younglings, the reports of reduced security, the Emperor's convenient absence from Coruscant, all of it was designed to draw them out, to make them believe that victory was possible. When they arrive at the temple, they will find death waiting for them. Vader and the Inquisitors will crush them utterly, destroying not just their bodies, but their spirits. And when the last Jedi falls, Palpatine will broadcast their defeat to the galaxy, transforming their desperate hope into a weapon against everything they stood for. It is, he reflects, a masterpiece of manipulation. The Jedi have always been their own worst enemies, their rigid code blinding them to the subtleties of politics and power. They could not see the Sith Lord in their midst for decades. They could not prevent the Clone Wars or the rise of the Empire. And now they cannot see the trap that closes around them. Palpatine laughs, a dry rasping sound that echoes through his throne room. The Force has many aspects, many uses. The Jedi understood only a fraction of its true potential. They focused on peace, on harmony, on the suppression of emotion. They never understood that passion is power, that anger can be fuel, that hatred can be transformed into strength. They were weak, and the weak always fall before the strong. Tomorrow, he will prove that truth once and for all. The infiltration begins at dawn. Obi-Wan slips through the crowded streets of Coruscant, his beard trimmed short, his Jedi robes replaced by the simple garments of a cargo hauler. Everywhere he looks, he sees reminders of how much has changed. Imperial propaganda plays on every public screen, extolling the virtues of the new order, warning citizens to report any suspicious activity. Stormtroopers stand on every corner, their white armor gleaming in the morning light. And above it all, the Jedi Temple looms, dark and silent, its spires reaching toward a sky filled with star destroyers. Obi-Wan makes contact with the others through subtle hand signals and brief exchanges in crowded cantinas. One by one, the teams confirm they are in position. Quinlan's sabotage team has reached the communications hub. Shaak Ti's extraction team has secured the landing pads. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. That is the first warning sign. Obi-Wan pushes his doubts aside as he approaches the temple's secondary entrance, a service door used by maintenance droids and cleaning crews. 3 other Jedi are with him, their lightsabers hidden beneath their clothes, their faces tense with anticipation. The door's security panel blinks red, then green as the slicing program Organa provided does its work. It opens with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that Obi-Wan has walked 1,000 times before. The memories hit him like a physical blow. He sees himself as a young Padawan, rushing through these halls to reach Qui-Gon's quarters. He sees the younglings practicing their forms in the training rooms, their faces bright with hope and wonder. He sees Anakin standing beside him, young and full of promise, before the darkness claimed him. "Master Kenobi," one of the Jedi whispers, "are you all right?" Obi-Wan blinks, forcing himself back to the present. "Yes. Stay focused. We have work to do." They move through the temple like ghosts, their connection to the Force allowing them to sense guards before they see them, to avoid patrols with supernatural precision. The interior of the temple is a strange mixture of the familiar and the alien. Imperial banners hang from walls that once displayed Jedi tapestries. Blaster scoring marks the stone where lightsaber duels once took place. And everywhere, there is the lingering stench of death, the psychic residue of the massacre that occurred here. But there are also signs of recent activity. Lights burn in corridors that should be dark. Consoles hum with active programs. The temple is not abandoned, not truly. Someone is here, maintaining it, using it for purposes that Obi-Wan cannot yet fathom. They reach the first checkpoint and find exactly what they expected. A squad of stormtroopers guarding a doorway, their weapons held loosely, their attention wandering. Obi-Wan signals to his companions, and they strike as one. Lightsabers ignite. Blaster bolts are deflected. In seconds, the guards are down, and the Jedi are moving again, deeper into the temple. Too easy, Obi-Wan thinks. This is too easy. Across the temple, Quinlan Vos is having similar thoughts. His sabotage team has reached the communications hub without incident, slipping past security measures that should have been impenetrable. Now they work quickly, planting charges and slicing into systems, preparing to blind the Empire at the crucial moment. But something feels wrong. The Force is turbulent, churning with energies that Quinlan cannot quite identify. It feels like the moment before a storm, when the air grows heavy and the sky darkens, and every instinct screams to find shelter. He calms Obi-Wan through their encrypted channel. "Something's off. This is too clean." Obi-Wan's voice comes back tense but controlled. "I know. But we're committed now. Proceed with the plan. If this is a trap, we'll spring it and fight our way out. What choice do we have? Quinlan wants to argue, wants to suggest that they abort and regroup, but he knows Obi-Wan is right. They have come too far to turn back now. Whatever awaits them, they will face it together. He nods to his team and continues the work. In the temple's central hall, Shakti coordinates the extraction effort from the shadows. Her team has secured the landing pads, neutralizing the guards with quiet efficiency. Their ships are ready, engines warm, prepared for a rapid departure. But she too feels the wrongness in the Force, the sense that they are walking into something far darker than they anticipated. She thinks of the younglings they came to save, innocent children twisted by the Empire's darkness, and her resolve hardens. Whatever the cost, she will see this through. She will not leave those children to become instruments of evil. She closes her eyes and reaches out through the Force, searching for their presence, for the bright sparks of young life that should be somewhere in this temple. She finds nothing. A cold dread settles in her stomach. Where are the children? The trap is sprung in an instant. Obi-Wan's team has reached the inner sanctum, the chamber where the younglings were supposedly being held. They breach the door and find themselves in a large circular room. Its walls lined with meditation alcoves, its floor marked with the patterns of 1,000 training exercises. And standing in the center of the room, lightsaber ignited, red blade casting crimson shadows across the stone, is Darth Vader. Obi-Wan. The voice is mechanical, cold, stripped of any humanity. The Jedi beside Obi-Wan gasp in shock, their lightsabers rising instinctively. They have heard rumors of the Emperor's enforcer, a monster in black armor who hunts Jedi survivors with mechanical precision. But none of them truly believed they would face him here. Hello, old friend. Obi-Wan's voice is steady, but his heart is racing. He can feel Anakin's presence beneath that mask, twisted and corrupted, but still there, still burning with anger and pain. You should have stayed hidden, Kenobi. You should have accepted your defeat. Instead, you walked into the trap like the fool you've always been. Obi-Wan ignites his lightsaber, the blue blade humming with contained power. Perhaps. But I had to try. There are younglings here who need our help. Vader's vocoder produces something like a laugh. There are no younglings here. There never were. They have been taken to a facility where they will be transformed into instruments of the Emperor's will. This temple is nothing but a monument to your failure. He raises his lightsaber and advances. And now, it will be your tomb. The battle erupts with sudden violence. Vader moves with terrifying speed, his red blade a blur as he engages Obi-Wan and the 3 other Jedi simultaneously. His fighting style has changed since Mustafar, adapted to accommodate his mechanical limbs and life support systems. It is less acrobatic, but more brutal. Each strike carrying the weight of hydraulic strength and cybernetic precision. One of the Jedi, a young knight named Roan Shrine, lunges forward with the aggressive strike. Vader parries it contemptuously and catches him in a force grip, lifting him off the ground. Shrine's eyes bulge as the pressure intensifies, his lightsaber falling from nerveless fingers. With a gesture, Vader hurls him against the wall with bone-shattering force. Shrine slumps to the ground and does not move. Obi-Wan attacks while Vader is occupied, his blade seeking the gaps in that black armor. But Vader is ready, pivoting to meet his strike with a clash that sends sparks flying. Their blades lock, and for a moment, they are face to face, blue eyes meeting the black lenses of Vader's mask. You've grown stronger, Obi-Wan observes, and you've grown weak, hiding, running, You were never worthy of training me. The duel intensifies as they separate and circle each other. Obi-Wan falls into the familiar patterns of Sorisu, his defensive form creating an almost impenetrable barrier of blue light. But Vader has learned from their last encounter. He does not simply attack with brute force. Instead, he probes Obi-Wan's defenses, seeking weaknesses, testing angles. His mechanical precision allows him to repeat the same strike with exact consistency, wearing down Obi-Wan's blocks in a way that would be impossible for a purely organic fighter. You should have killed me when you had the chance. Vader growls between strikes. On Mustafar, you left me burning. You thought the fire would finish what you could not. He unleashes a powerful overhead strike that Obi-Wan barely deflects. But fire only makes steel stronger. Obi-Wan does not waste breath on a response. He conserves his energy, lets Vader's rage wash over him like water over stone. But even stone erodes eventually, and he can feel his strength beginning to flag. The other two Jedi attack from the flanks, trying to overwhelm Vader with numbers. But the Dark Lord of the Sith is not alone. From the shadows emerge other figures, humanoids in black armor with red-bladed lightsabers of their own. The Inquisitors. They move to intercept the Jedi, their fighting styles aggressive and unrefined, but bolstered by the dark side of the Force. The chamber dissolves into chaos as multiple duels erupt simultaneously. One Inquisitor, a Mirialan female with cold eyes and a spinning double-bladed lightsaber, engages the Jedi Knight Dara, forcing her back with a series of sweeping attacks. The spinning blade creates a defensive barrier that is difficult to penetrate, and Dara finds herself on the defensive immediately. She parries a strike that nearly takes her head, then sidesteps a thrust aimed at her heart. The Inquisitor laughs, a cruel sound that echoes off the chamber walls. Is this the best the Jedi have to offer? Dara grits her teeth and counterattacks, her lightsaber moving in the precise patterns of Shi-Cho. She scores a glancing blow across the Inquisitor's arm, drawing a hiss of pain. But the Mirialan responds with a burst of Force lightning that catches Dara off guard, sending her stumbling back. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan continues his deadly dance with Vader. The Dark Lord's attacks come faster now, each one harder than the last. Obi-Wan can feel the hatred radiating off him, a palpable force that seems to darken the very air. He draws on the Force for strength, letting it flow through him. But the dark side presence in the room is so strong that even his connection feels muted, diminished. This is what Palpatine planned, he realizes. Not just a physical trap, but a spiritual one. The temple itself has been corrupted, transformed into a place of darkness that weakens the light. Vader seems to sense his realization. The Emperor has remade this place. The walls are soaked in dark side energy now. Every youngling that died here, every Jedi that fell, their pain feeds the darkness. He laughs, a terrible sound filtered through his vocoder. You came to save your precious temple. Instead, you will die in it. Obi-Wan does not respond. He cannot afford to. Every ounce of his concentration is focused on staying alive, on deflecting Vader's relentless assault. But even as he fights, a part of his mind is working on the larger problem. They need to escape. They cannot win this fight. Not here, not now. The best they can hope for is survival. Across the chamber, Dara is losing her battle against the Inquisitor. A vicious strike sends her lightsaber flying from her hand, and before she can recall it with the Force, the spinning blade descends. Dara screams as the red lightsaber cuts through her shoulder, severing her arm. She collapses to the ground, her blood pooling on the ancient stone. The Inquisitor raises her weapon for the killing blow, But before she can strike, a blast of force energy catches her from the side, throwing her across the room. Boltar Swan stands in the doorway, her face set with grim determination, more Jedi pouring in behind her. Across the temple, alarms begin to wail. Quinlan Vos curses as his comm unit erupts with frantic reports. We're compromised. The entire temple is lighting up. There are stormtroopers everywhere, converging on our position. His sabotage efforts have failed. The charges they planted have been discovered and deactivated. The systems they thought they'd sliced were actually feeding them false information, allowing the Empire to track their every move. It was never going to work, he realizes with sick certainty. They knew we were coming. They knew everything. The realization hits him like a physical blow. Every step of their plan, every contingency, every careful calculation, all of it was anticipated. The Empire didn't just prepare for their attack. They invited it. They created the conditions that made it seem possible, then waited patiently for the Jedi to walk into the trap. Quinlan thinks of the others, of Obi-Wan and Shaak-Ti and all the Jedi who trusted that this mission could succeed. He thinks of the younglings they came to save, who were never here to begin with. The Emperor played them perfectly, using their hope as a weapon against them. It was, Quinlan has to admit, masterfully done. But admiration for his enemy's cunning does not translate to surrender. Quinlan Vos has survived worse than this. He has been tortured, mind-probed, left for dead more times than he can count. If the Empire thinks they can break him, they are sorely mistaken. He ignites his lightsaber as the doors burst open and stormtroopers pour through. Blaster bolts fill the air, and Quinlan leaps into action, his green blade deflecting shots back at their sources. Around him, his team fights with desperate intensity. But they are outnumbered and outmaneuvered. One by one, they begin to fall. A Zabrak Jedi named Kira goes down first, a blaster bolt catching her in the shoulder, then another in the chest. She collapses without a sound, her lightsaber clattering across the floor. Quinlan reaches for her through the Force, hoping against hope that she might still be alive. But he feels nothing. Only emptiness where her presence used to be. He channels his grief into his fighting, his lightsaber moving in a blur of green light. Stormtroopers fall before him, their white armor no protection against a weapon that can cut through anything. But for everyone he kills, two more take their place. The Empire has an endless supply of soldiers, and Quinlan has only himself and his dwindling team. A second Jedi falls, then a third. Quinlan finds himself backed against a wall, his breathing ragged, his arms burning with exhaustion. The stormtroopers advance slowly, confident in their victory. They have him surrounded. There is no escape. And then, impossibly, an explosion tears through the corridor behind the stormtroopers. The blast throws them aside, creating a gap in their formation. Through the smoke, Quinlan sees a familiar face. Boltar Swan, her robes torn and bloody, her lightsaber in one hand and a thermal detonator in the other. Are you just going to stand there? Or are you going to run? Quinlan doesn't need to be asked twice. He leaps through the gap, following Boltar through a maze of corridors that she seems to navigate by instinct. More stormtroopers appear, but the two Jedi cut through them without slowing, their lightsabers working in perfect synchronization. "How did you find me?" Quinlan gasps between engagements. "The Force," Boltar replies. "It has a way of guiding us where we need to be." They burst out of a side door and onto a narrow ledge overlooking the temple's central atrium. Below them, Quinlan can see the main battle raging. Lightsabers flashing in the darkness, blaster bolts crisscrossing the air. It looks like chaos, like a scene from a nightmare. But somewhere in that chaos, his fellow Jedi are still fighting. They haven't given up yet. We need to get to the landing pads, Boltar says. It's our only chance. Lead the way, Quinlan replies. And pray, the Force is still with us. On the landing pads, Shaak Ti receives the news with grim acceptance. She had sensed the trap too late, had trusted in hope when she should have trusted in the Force. Now that hope has become a weapon against them. But she will not despair. She will not surrender. If this is to be her final battle, she will make it one worthy of a Jedi Master. Fall back to the ships, she commands her team. We need to provide extraction for whoever survives. But Master T, there are Imperials everywhere. We can't. Then we will fight through them. She ignites her lightsaber, its blue blade casting stark shadows across her face. We are Jedi. This is what we do. They move toward the ships, but they are not alone. Stepping out of the shadows comes a figure that makes Shaak Ti's blood run cold. A Pau'an with yellow eyes and a cruel smile, his lightsaber hilt spinning lazily in his hand. The Grand Inquisitor, Master Shaak Ti. The Emperor sends his regards. He ignites his weapon, its red blade spinning in the circular design that marks Inquisitor weapons. I have been looking forward to this. Back in the central chamber, Obi-Wan is fighting for his life. Vader is relentless, his attacks coming with mechanical precision, each strike harder than the last. The other Jedi who accompanied him are down now, killed by Vader or the Inquisitors who descended upon them like vultures. Only Obi-Wan remains, his blade a blur as he defends against Vader's onslaught. You can't win, Vader growls. You couldn't defeat me on Mustafar, when I was weak and burning. You certainly can't defeat me now. Obi-Wan doesn't waste breath on a response. He lets his actions speak for him, falling into the familiar patterns of Sorei Su, the defensive form that has kept him alive through 1,000 battles. He does not try to attack. He simply endures, letting Vader's rage crash against him like waves against a cliff. But even cliffs erode eventually. Vader's strikes come faster, harder, each one driving Obi-Wan back another step. His arms burn with the effort of deflecting blows that carry the force of industrial machinery. His connection to the Force wavers as the dark side presses against him, seeking to overwhelm his defenses. He's going to die here. He knows it with sudden, crystalline clarity. He is going to die, and the Jedi will die with him, and Palpatine will have won completely. And then, impossibly, hope returns. A new presence enters the chamber, bright and fierce in the Force. Obi-Wan catches a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision, and then a blue lightsaber is intercepting Vader's killing stroke, pushing the Dark Lord back with surprising strength. Boltar Swan stands between them, her face set with determination. Get up, Master Kenobi. We're not done yet. Behind her, more Jedi pour into the chamber, survivors from other teams who have fought their way here through the chaos. They are battered and bloody, their numbers reduced. But they are alive, and they are not giving up. Vader snarls in frustration as he finds himself facing a renewed assault. The Inquisitors move to support him, but they are overwhelmed by the sudden influx of opponents. For a moment, the tide of battle shifts. Obi-Wan rises to his feet, his lightsaber raised. How? Boltar's smile is grim. The temple has many secrets. I grew up here, remember? I know paths that even the Emperor doesn't. She parries an Inquisitor's strike and riposts with lethal precision. But we need to leave. Now, more are coming. She's right. Obi-Wan can feel them, Imperial reinforcements converging from every direction. Whatever advantage they've gained is temporary. They need to reach Shaak Ti and the ships before it's too late. "Retreat," he commands, his voice carrying across the chamber, fighting withdrawal to the landing pads. "Do not engage unless necessary. Move." The Jedi begin to fall back, covering each other as they disengage from their opponents. But Vader will not let them go so easily. He pursues Obi-Wan with single-minded intensity, his red blade seeking his former master's life. "You don't get to run, Kenobi. You don't get to hide. I will hunt you across the galaxy if I have to." "Then hunt me," Obi-Wan replies, ducking under a vicious swing. But not today. He reaches out through the Force and pulls, bringing a section of the ancient ceiling down between them. The crash of stone buys precious seconds, and Obi-Wan uses them, sprinting after his fellow Jedi as they race for survival. On the landing pads, Shaak Ti is locked in combat with the Grand Inquisitor. Their blades flash and spin, red against blue, darkness against light. The Padawan is skilled, his attacks enhanced by the dark side's fury. But Shaak Ti is a master, trained by the greatest warriors the Jedi Order ever produced. She meets his every strike, turns his aggression against him, waits for the opening she knows will come. "Your order is finished," the Grand Inquisitor hisses. "Your precious younglings will become tools of the Empire. Everything you built will be turned to ash." The Grand Inquisitor presses his attack, his spinning lightsaber creating a wall of deadly light. Shaak Ti retreats a step, then another, drawing him forward. She has studied the Inquisitor's fighting style through intelligence gathered over the past weeks. She knows that their reliance on spinning weapons, while intimidating, creates predictable patterns. When a fighter spins their blade, there are moments when it is out of position, moments when their guard is open. She simply needs to find that moment. The Padawan lunges, his weapon spinning horizontally in a strike meant to bisect her at the waist. Shaak Ti drops beneath it, feeling the heat of the blade pass inches above her montrals. In the same motion, she thrusts upward, her blue lightsaber seeking the Grand Inquisitor's exposed torso. He twists away at the last second, the blade scoring a burning line across his ribs instead of piercing his heart. He snarls in pain and disengages, circling her warily. "You're better than I expected. The report said you were a teacher, not a warrior." Shaak Ti allows herself a small smile. A Jedi is both. One cannot teach what one cannot do. They clash again, their blades meeting in a shower of sparks. The Grand Inquisitor tries to use his size advantage, pressing close and using his superior reach to keep her on the defensive. But Shaak Ti is faster, her smaller frame allowing her to slip beneath his attacks and counter with precise strikes that he struggles to block. She can feel the dark side swirling around him, feeding his strength, but she can also feel its limitations. The dark side grants power, but it does not grant wisdom. It makes its users aggressive, reckless, prone to mistakes. She simply needs to wait for his. The mistake comes a moment later. The Grand Inquisitor overcommits to an overhead strike, putting all his weight behind a blow, meant to cleave her in two. Shaak Ti sidesteps smoothly, letting the blade pass harmlessly beside her, and drives her elbow into his exposed side. The impact staggers him, and she follows with a sweeping kick that takes his legs out from under him. He falls heavily, his spinning lightsaber clattering away across the landing pad. Shaak Ti doesn't respond with words. She responds with her lightsaber, a sudden thrust that catches the Inquisitor off guard and scores a burning line across his shoulder. He snarls in pain and redoubles his assault. But he is rattled now, uncertain. And in that uncertainty, Shaak Ti finds her victory. She feints high and strikes low, her blade severing the Inquisitor's weapon hand. He screams as the spinning lightsaber clatters to the ground, and Shaak Ti follows through, driving her blade into his chest. The Grand Inquisitor's yellow eyes widen in shock. He tries to speak, but only blood comes out. "You were right about one thing," Shaak Ti says quietly. "The Order is finished, but the Jedi are not." Then the light fades from his gaze, and he collapses. Shaak Ti stands over his body for a moment, catching her breath. She has killed before, many times during the Clone Wars. But this feels different. This was not a battle droid or a separatist soldier. This was a Force user. Someone who might have been a Jedi in another life, twisted by the Empire into a weapon against his own kind. She feels a pang of something that might be regret. Then she pushes it aside. There is no time for grief. The battle is far from over. Shaak Ti barely has time to catch her breath before more enemies arrive. Stormtroopers flood the landing pad, their blasters filling the air with deadly energy. Behind them come more Inquisitors, drawn by the death of their leader, eager for revenge. Shaak Ti deflects bolt after bolt, her lightsaber a blur of motion. Her team fights around her, but they are outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, they fall. Then Obi-Wan arrives with the remaining Jedi, crashing into them, Imperial forces like a tidal wave. Lightsabers flash, bodies fall. The landing pad becomes a charnel house as Jedi and Imperials fight with desperate intensity. "To the ships," Shaak Ti shouts. Everyone to the ships now. They run. Some of them don't make it. An Inquisitor's blade catches a young Padawan in the back. A stormtrooper's lucky shot brings down a knight who was just steps from safety. But others reach the ships, piling into the transports that Shaak Ti's team prepared. Engines roar to life. Repulsor lifts engage. The ships begin to rise, even as blaster fire scorches their hulls and Inquisitors leap to grab hold of landing struts. Obi-Wan is the last to board. He stands at the ramp of the final transport, his lightsaber held high, deflecting the barrage of fire that seeks to bring them down. Bultar Swan reaches out to him, her hand extended. "Master Kenobi, come on." He takes one last look at the temple, the only home he's ever known, now a monument to death and failure. Then he takes her hand and leaps aboard as the ramp closes behind him. The transport rockets skyward, leaving the chaos behind. But they are not out of danger yet. Through the viewport, Obi-Wan can see TIE fighters launching from nearby platforms, their screaming engines a promise of pursuit. And above them, vast and terrible, hangs the Star Destroyer Executor, its weapons already training on their fleeing ships. It's over. The thought comes unbidden, and Obi-Wan pushes it aside. It is not over. Not yet. Not while any of them still live. But even as he thinks this, the Executor opens fire. Turbo laser bolts streak through the sky, vaporizing one of the fleeing transports in an instant. Another is caught in the crossfire of TIE fighters, spiraling down to crash somewhere in the depths of Coruscant's endless cityscape. Their own ship shudders as a glancing hit damages their shields. Warning lights flash, alarms blare. The pilot, a young Jedi who hasn't spoken a word since the retreat began, fights with the controls, trying to coax more speed from engines never designed for combat. "Hyperspace coordinates," Shaak Ti demands. "Get us out of here." "Working on it," the pilot replies through gritted teeth. "The Navi computer is damaged. It's going to take time. We don't have time." Obi-Wan moves to the co-pilot seat, his fingers flying over the controls. He is no slouch as a pilot himself, and he brings every ounce of his skill to bear. Between them, they manage to nurse the damaged ship higher, away from the worst of the pursuit. But the TIE fighters are relentless, and the Executor is adjusting its fire, its turbo lasers coming closer with every volley. Then, impossibly, rescue comes. A squadron of starfighters drops out of hyperspace directly in the path of the pursuing TIEs. They are not Imperial ships. They are Old Republic craft, Z-95 Headhunters and ARC-170s, bearing the insignia of Alderaan. Bail Organa's voice crackles over the comm. "Get to the rendezvous point. We'll cover your escape." The Senator's fighters engage the TIEs with ferocious efficiency, drawing their attention away from the fleeing transports. It is a desperate gambit. A senator of the Imperial Senate openly attacking Imperial forces. It is an act of rebellion that can never be taken back. But Bail Organa has seen what the Empire truly is. He has seen the younglings in the temple, seen the darkness that Palpatine has unleashed upon the galaxy. He has made his choice, and he will live or die by it. The surviving transports punch into hyperspace, leaving the chaos of Coruscant behind. In the sudden silence that follows, Obi-Wan slumps in his seat, his body trembling with exhaustion and grief. They escaped, but at what cost? He takes stock of who made it. Shaak Ti, wounded but alive. Bultar Swan, her face pale with shock. Quinlan Voss, who somehow fought his way out of the communications hub and reached a ship. A handful of others, knights and Padawans whose names he barely knows. Out of the 18 Jedi who attempted the Reclamation, perhaps 7 survived. More than 60% losses. And they accomplished nothing. No youngling saved, no message of hope broadcast, just death and failure and the destruction of their network. The Empire will be hunting them now with renewed intensity. Their faces will be plastered across every HoloNet channel, branded as terrorists, as enemies of the state. Whatever anonymity they had is gone. And somewhere in the depths of space, Emperor Palpatine laughs. The aftermath is everything Palpatine planned. The attack on the Jedi Temple is broadcast across the galaxy, carefully edited to show the Jedi as the aggressors. Footage of lightsabers cutting down stormtroopers plays on an endless loop, accompanied by somber narration about the terrorist threat that nearly destabilized the capital. The deaths of Imperial personnel are mourned as sacrifices in defense of order and peace. The Grand Inquisitor is posthumously honored as a hero who gave his life to protect the Empire from those who would destroy it. And the backlash is immediate and overwhelming. Citizens across the galaxy express their outrage at the Jedi attack. Petitions circulate demanding harsher measures against any remaining Force users. Senators who once quietly sympathized with the Old Republic now publicly denounce any suggestion of reconciliation or amnesty. The galaxy's fear has been transformed into hatred, exactly as Palpatine intended. On Coruscant, crowds gather in the streets, waving Imperial banners and chanting slogans against the Jedi terrorists. HoloNet pundits debate the appropriate punishment for any surviving attackers. Some call for public execution. Others suggest that the Jedi should be studied, their Force abilities dissected and cataloged before they are destroyed. The fever pitch of public anger is everything Palpatine could have hoped for. In the core worlds, systems that had remained neutral or quietly resistant to Imperial authority suddenly fall into line. The attack on the capital has demonstrated the ongoing threat that Force users represent. Local governments that had dragged their feet on implementing Imperial regulations now rush to comply. Military commanders who had expressed private reservations about the new order publicly reaffirm their loyalty. The transformation is remarkable in its speed and totality. In the Outer Rim, the reaction is more mixed. Many worlds there have suffered under both Republic and Imperial rule, and they view the conflict between Jedi and Empire as just another power struggle among distant elites. Some even express quiet admiration for the Jedi's willingness to fight back against overwhelming odds. But these voices are quickly silenced as Imperial forces crack down on any expression of sympathy. The message is clear. There will be no tolerance for dissent. 3 days after the failed Reclamation, the Emperor addresses the Imperial Senate in person. The chamber is packed, every seat filled with senators and representatives who have been summoned to witness this historic moment. Stormtroopers line the walls, their white armor gleaming under the harsh lights. The atmosphere is tense, charged with anticipation and fear. Palpatine rises slowly, his face a mask of sorrow that conceals the triumph beneath. He moves to the podium, his hands trembling slightly, the very image of a leader burdened by terrible responsibility. When he speaks, his voice is heavy with emotion that he has spent decades learning to fake. My fellow citizens of the Empire, he begins, 3 days ago, our capital was attacked. The Jedi, those who once claimed to be guardians of peace, revealed their true nature as terrorists and fanatics. They infiltrated our most sacred institutions. They murdered innocent civilians and loyal soldiers. They sought to plunge our galaxy back into the chaos of the Clone Wars. He pauses, letting his words sink in. Many brave men and women gave their lives defending our way of life. Among them was the Grand Inquisitor, a hero who stood against the Jedi menace and paid the ultimate price for his courage. We honor their sacrifice. We mourn their loss, and we vow that their deaths will not be in vain. The senators murmur in agreement. Some of them genuinely believe what Palpatine is saying. Others know better, but are too afraid to dissent. And a few, a precious few, sit in stony silence, their faces betraying nothing of the horror they feel at what their government has become. Palpatine continues, his voice growing stronger. But this attack has revealed more than the Jedi's fanaticism. It has exposed a fundamental weakness in our system of governance. He gestures broadly, encompassing the entire chamber. This Senate, for all its noble intentions, was designed for a galaxy at peace. It moves slowly, cautiously, bound by procedures and protocols that our enemies exploit. The Jedi terrorists were able to infiltrate Coruscant because of bureaucratic delays, political divisions, and systemic inefficiencies that hampered our response. He lets his words hang in the air. The senators shift uncomfortably. Some of them can see where this is going, others remain oblivious. I have always believed in democracy, Palpatine says, his voice dripping with false sincerity. I have always believed that the voice of the people should guide our destiny. But I have also sworn an oath to protect this empire and its citizens. And when democracy becomes an obstacle to that protection, when the very institutions we have built prevent us from defending ourselves, then I must make a choice. The chamber falls silent. Even the air seems to still. Therefore, for the protection of our great empire, I am today dissolving the Imperial Senate. Gasps echo through the chamber. Some senators rise to their feet, their faces twisted with shock and outrage. Others remain seated, their expressions resigned, as if they always knew this day would come. Regional governors will now have direct control over their territories. Palpatine continues, his voice rising above the tumult. The military will assume responsibility for maintaining order. And I will personally oversee the defense of our civilization against all threats, both foreign and domestic. Protests erupt from several sections of the chamber. A Chandrilan senator stands and points accusingly at Palpatine. This is unconstitutional. You cannot simply dissolve the Senate. The people will not stand for this tyranny. Palpatine smiles coldly. The people will stand for whatever keeps them safe. They have made that abundantly clear in the days since the attack. As for the Constitution, he pauses, savoring the moment. The Constitution serves the Empire, not the other way around. If it prevents us from protecting ourselves, then it is a failed document that must be revised. Stormtroopers move forward, surrounding the protesting senators. Some resist and are dragged from the chamber. Others fall silent, cowed by the display of force. Within minutes, the opposition has been neutralized, and Palpatine stands alone at the podium, master of all he surveys. This is not the end of democracy. He lies smoothly. It is its transformation into something stronger, something capable of meeting the challenges we face. When the Jedi threat has been eliminated, when peace has been restored, we will revisit the question of governance. Until then, I ask for your trust, your loyalty, and your courage. Together, we will build a future worthy of our great civilization. The remaining senators, those who have not been removed or intimidated into silence, rise to their feet and applaud. Some do so enthusiastically, genuinely believing that Palpatine's measures are necessary. Others clap mechanically, their faces blank masks that hide their despair. And a few do not clap at all, sitting in silence as the galaxy they knew dies around them. Bail Organa is not among them. He fled Coruscant aboard one of his own ships, a wanted man, a traitor to the Empire he never truly served. Now he travels through hyperspace toward a secret rendezvous, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. The open rebellion he committed has changed everything. He can no longer work within the system, no longer pretend to serve while secretly resisting. Now he must build something new, something that can stand against the Empire's darkness. As his ship hurtles through hyperspace, Bail composes a message. It is addressed to a list of names, people he has cultivated over the years, contacts who share his vision of a galaxy free from tyranny. The message is brief and coded, but its meaning is clear. The time for subtle resistance is over. The time for open rebellion has begun. He thinks of the Jedi survivors, scattered and broken. He thinks of Padme, of her dream of democracy and freedom. He thinks of the child hidden on Tatooine, a hope for the future that must be protected at all costs. And he begins to plan. The surviving Jedi have scattered again, forced to abandon the network they so carefully built. They cannot risk another gathering, another coordinated action. Palpatine has proven that he is always several steps ahead, that any plan they conceive has likely already been anticipated. They must learn from their failure. They must become shadows, ghosts, whispers in the darkness. Anything else is suicide. Obi-Wan finds himself back on Tatooine, standing once again in the desert outside the Lars homestead. He has come full circle, back to the beginning, back to the task that Yoda assigned him before the Reclamation seemed possible. Watch over the boy. Keep him safe. Trust in the Force. The journey from Alderaan to Tatooine was long and circuitous, designed to throw off any Imperial pursuit. Obi-Wan changed ships 3 times, traveling through systems so remote they barely appeared on navigational charts. He spoke to no one, avoided all contact with other beings, moved through the galaxy like a ghost. The paranoia that had seemed excessive before now seemed merely prudent. The Empire's reach was longer than any of them had realized. As he watches the Lars homestead from his hiding place among the rocks, Obi-Wan thinks about everything he has lost. Qui-Gon, Anakin, Padme, the Order he served his entire life, the Republic he swore to protect, friends and comrades who died in the Temple or on countless battlefields across the galaxy. The weight of that loss threatens to crush him, to drive him to his knees, to make him surrender to despair. But he refuses to let it. He had thought he could do more. He had thought he could strike back at the Empire, rescue the younglings, preserve something of what the Jedi once were. He was wrong. The failure burns in him like a hot coal, a constant reminder of his hubris. How many died because of his hope? How many lives were lost because he couldn't accept that the time wasn't right? In the distance, he can see a small figure running between the moisture evaporators. Luke. The boy is growing quickly, his Force presence brightening with each passing day. Owen Lars does his best to keep the child grounded, to shield him from any hint of his true heritage. But Obi-Wan can feel Luke's potential, can sense the power that sleeps within him. One day, that power will awaken. One day, Luke Skywalker will become something extraordinary. But not today. Today, Obi-Wan's job is simply to watch and wait, to endure the long years of exile, trusting that the Force has a purpose even when that purpose is impossible to see. It is perhaps the hardest thing he has ever done. But it is also the most important. Master Qui-Gon's voice seems to echo in his memory. Be mindful of the living Force, Obi-Wan. Do not lose sight of the present in your hope for the future. He understands now what his master meant. The Reclamation was never about the present. It was about the past, about what they had lost, about reclaiming something that could never be reclaimed. The temple was just a building. The younglings, if they still lived, were beyond their reach. The Jedi Order as it was, the order of 1,000 generations, was gone and could never return. But that did not mean the Jedi were finished. As Obi-Wan gazes at the twin suns setting over the desert, he feels something shift within him. The grief is still there, the guilt, the sense of failure. But beneath it, like a seed in barren soil, something new is growing. Hope. Not the desperate hope that drove them to the temple, the hope that they could turn back time and undo what had been done. This is something different, something quieter, something more patient. Across the galaxy, Shakti has found her own form of peace. She settled on a remote world in the Outer Rim, a place where the Empire's presence is minimal and strangers are not unusual. Here, among farmers and traders who ask no questions, she has begun to rebuild. At first, she simply rested. Her wounds from the battle were severe, both physical and spiritual. She spent weeks in meditation, processing the trauma of what she had experienced, coming to terms with the failure that had cost so many lives. The Force sustained her during this time, its light a comfort against the darkness that seemed to pervade everything. But rest eventually gave way to purpose. Shakti is a teacher by nature. It is what she did in the temple, what she was best at, what brought her the most fulfillment. And even in exile, even in hiding, there is teaching to be done. They came to her one by one. A young girl with nascent Force abilities whose parents feared what the Empire would do if they discovered her. A former Padawan who escaped Order 66 through luck and circumstance, but who never completed her training. An older man who had always felt connected to something larger than himself, but who had never understood what it meant. Shakti took them in. She trained them not in the rigid doctrines of the old order, but in something more flexible, more adaptable to the dangerous world they inhabited. She taught them to hide their abilities, to use the Force subtly rather than obviously. She taught them the philosophy of the Jedi, without the structure that had made the Order vulnerable to Palpatine's manipulation. It was a small thing, this hidden school on a forgotten world. But it was something, a spark of light preserved against the darkness. And Shakti knew that sparks had a way of becoming flames when the conditions were right. Quinlan Vos returned to Kashyyyk, to the Wookiee resistance cells that sheltered him before. He had left them to join the Reclamation, believing that the grand gesture was more important than the small one. He was wrong. The grand gesture achieved nothing. It was the small gestures that mattered. The day-to-day acts of defiance, the refusal to submit even when submission seemed the only option. The Wookiees welcomed him back without judgment. They understood failure. Their own world had fallen to Imperial occupation, their people enslaved to work in Imperial facilities across the galaxy. They had failed to prevent this, despite their strength, their courage, their willingness to fight. And yet they continued to resist, not because they believed they could win, but because resistance itself was victory. It was a refusal to accept the Empire's narrative, a declaration that Kashyyyk would never truly belong to anyone but its people. Quinlan threw himself into this resistance with renewed purpose. He trained Wookiee warriors in techniques that helped them survive against Imperial forces. He led raids on Imperial supply lines, disrupting their operations and giving hope to those who had none. He helped escaped slaves find their way to safety, established underground networks that funneled resources to resistance cells across the sector. He did not dream of overthrowing the Empire. He dreamed only of surviving, of helping others survive, of keeping the flame of resistance burning until the day when it might become something more. It was humble work, unglamorous, often thankless. But it was real. It made a difference in ways that the Reclamation never could. And slowly, over months and years, the Kashyyyk resistance grew stronger. Other systems began to look to them as an example. Other resistance cells established contact, shared resources, coordinated operations. What had begun as a scattered collection of desperate fighters became a network, a movement, a threat that the Empire could not ignore. Bultar Swan found her own path. She traveled to the edges of known space, to worlds so remote that even Imperial scouts rarely visited them. There, among civilizations that had never heard of the Republic or the Empire, she sought understanding. The failure of the Reclamation had shaken her faith in everything she believed. The Jedi had promised that the light would always triumph over darkness, that justice would always prevail, that the Force would guide them to victory. But the Force had guided them to defeat. The light had been overwhelmed by shadows. Everything they had built had been destroyed in a matter of hours. She needed to understand why. She needed to know what the Jedi had done wrong, what blind spots had allowed Palpatine to manipulate them for decades, what changes might prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. And so she traveled and studied and learned. She studied with Force traditions that predated the Jedi by millennia. She learned techniques that the Order had forbidden or forgotten. She explored philosophies that challenged everything she had been taught about the nature of light and darkness, about the proper relationship between a Force user and the galaxy around them. What she found was not comforting. The Jedi had made mistakes, many of them. They had become too rigid, too hierarchical, too entangled with political power. They had forgotten that the Force was not a tool to be wielded, but a relationship to be nurtured. They had lost touch with the living beings they were supposed to serve, retreating into their temple and their traditions while the galaxy changed around them. But she also found hope. The Force was not diminished by the fall of the Jedi. It still flowed through all living things, still connected every being in the galaxy. The light had not been defeated, merely temporarily overshadowed. And shadows, by their very nature, were impermanent. They existed only where light could not reach. As long as the light continued to shine somewhere, the shadows would never truly win. Bultar Swan returned to the known galaxy a changed woman. She was no longer a Jedi, not in the traditional sense. But she was something else. Something new. Something that might one day help rebuild what had been lost. She began to write, recording everything she had learned, preserving it for future generations who might benefit from the wisdom she had gained. Her writings would one day become foundational texts for a new Jedi Order, though she would not live to see it. And Bail Organa built his rebellion. It started small, a network of contacts, sympathizers, and fellow travelers who shared his vision of a galaxy free from tyranny. Many of them were senators who had quietly opposed Palpatine's rise, but who had been too afraid to act openly. Others were military officers who had seen the Empire's atrocities firsthand and could no longer remain silent. Still others were ordinary citizens, farmers and factory workers and merchants who simply wanted to live in a galaxy where their children would be free. Bail reached out to each of them individually, carefully, aware that any one of them might be an Imperial agent or a coward who would sell him out to save their own skin. He used coded messages, encrypted communications, face-to-face meetings in obscure locations. He built trust slowly, testing each potential ally before revealing the full extent of his plans. The first cell was established on Alderaan, hidden in the mountains where Bail had sheltered the Jedi survivors. It was small, perhaps 20 people, but they were dedicated and capable. They began to train, to stockpile weapons, to gather intelligence on Imperial operations in the sector. They were not yet ready to fight, but they were preparing for the day when fighting would become necessary. From Alderaan, the network expanded. A cell on Chandrila, led by a young politician named Mon Mothma, who had been vocal in her opposition to Palpatine's emergency powers. A cell on Corellia, built around a smuggling operation that could move people and supplies across Imperial checkpoints. A cell on Ryloth, drawing on the Twi'lek population's long history of resistance against oppression. Each cell was independent, isolated from the others to prevent the Empire from unraveling the entire network if one was compromised. They communicated through intermediaries, shared resources when possible, coordinated when necessary. It was inefficient, cumbersome, frustrating, but it was also resilient. When Imperial security eventually discovered and destroyed the Chandrilan cell, the others continued to operate, untouched by the betrayal. Bail's wife, Breha, became his closest confidant and most trusted ally. She managed the political side of things, maintaining Alderaan's facade of loyalty while secretly channeling the planet's considerable resources toward the rebellion. Their adopted daughter, Leia, grew up surrounded by these secrets, absorbing the values of freedom and justice that would one day make her a leader in her own right. The years were long. The work was hard. There were setbacks and defeats, betrayals and losses. More than once, Bail wondered if he was accomplishing anything, if the rebellion he was building would ever amount to more than a minor annoyance to the Empire. But he persevered. He had made a promise to himself, to Padme's memory, to the galaxy itself. He would not stop until the Empire was destroyed or he was dead. The Emperor, of course, knows all of this. His spies are everywhere, his reach unlimited. He watches Bail Organa's movements with amusement, allows the nascent rebellion to grow just enough to be useful. A scattered resistance serves his purposes, gives his military something to fight, justifies the continued expansion of his power. As long as it remains small and divided, it poses no real threat. But Palpatine is not infallible. For all his power, for all his foresight, there are things even he cannot see. On Tatooine, a boy grows up under the twin suns, unaware of his destiny. On Dagobah, a master waits in exile, his connection to the Force stronger than ever, despite the darkness that surrounds him. And in the hearts of those who survived the Reclamation, a new understanding takes root, one that will eventually blossom into something the Emperor never anticipated. Ludic's failure of the Jedi Reclamation is complete. Palpatine has won this battle, has used it to cement his power and destroy what remained of the Republic. The Jedi survivors are scattered, their network destroyed, their hope seemingly crushed. But wars are not won in single battles. They are won in the accumulation of moments, the slow building of strength, the patient waiting for the right opportunity. The Jedi who survived have learned this lesson in the hardest possible way. They will not forget it. Years pass, a decade, then another. The Empire tightens its grip on the galaxy. Star destroyers patrol every system, stormtroopers enforce order on every world, and the Inquisitors hunt any Force user who emerges from hiding. The memory of the Jedi fades, becomes legend, becomes myth. Children grow up who have never known a galaxy without Imperial rule, who cannot imagine a time when beings with lightsabers protected the innocent rather than hunted them. The darkness seems absolute. The Empire seems eternal. Hope seems like a distant memory, a relic of a time before the shadows fell. But appearances are deceiving. In hidden corners of the galaxy, resistance flourishes. On Kashyyyk, Quinlan Vos and his Wookiee allies have become a serious threat to Imperial operations in the sector. Their raids have disrupted supply lines, freed slaves, and inspired similar uprisings on neighboring worlds. The Empire has sent 3 different commanders to deal with them, and all 3 have failed. The Wookiee resistance has become a symbol, proof that the Empire can be fought, that defiance is possible. Throughout the core worlds and the Outer Rim, Bail Organa's rebellion has grown from a handful of cells to a genuine movement. They have ships now, soldiers, bases hidden in asteroid fields and on uninhabited moons. They have won victories, small ones, but victories nonetheless. Each success draws more recruits, more resources, more support from systems that have grown weary of Imperial oppression. But the seeds planted in the aftermath of the Reclamation continue to grow. Bail Organa's rebellion expands, drawing in more systems, more resources, more fighters. What began as a scattered collection of malcontents becomes a genuine threat to Imperial stability. They call themselves the Alliance to Restore the Republic, but most simply know them as the Rebellion. They strike Imperial targets with increasing boldness, inspired by the legend of Jedi who once fought against impossible odds. When captured rebels are tortured for information, some of them invoke names like Kenobi and Shak Ti, heroes from a time before darkness fell. They do not know if those heroes still live, but they know what they stood for, and that is enough. On Tatooine, Luke Skywalker grows into a young man. He knows nothing of his heritage, nothing of the Force that flows through his veins. But he dreams of adventure, of escape, of being part of something greater than moisture farming and sand. He looks up at the stars and wonders what lies beyond them. And sometimes, in the stillness of the desert night, he feels something calling to him, a presence at the edge of his perception, guiding him toward a destiny he cannot yet imagine. Obi-Wan watches from the shadows, as he has for nearly 2 decades. He has aged, his hair gone gray, his face lined with the weight of years and grief. But his connection to the Force remains strong, perhaps stronger than ever. He has had time to meditate, to reflect, to understand things that escaped him in his youth. The failure of the Reclamation taught him patience. It taught him that the Force has its own timeline, its own purposes, and that even the best-intentioned actions can lead to disaster if they come at the wrong moment. He waits for the right moment now. He will know it when it comes, And on a remote world in the Outer Rim, Shakti continues her experiments with new forms of Jedi training. She has gathered a handful of Force-sensitive individuals over the years. Refugees from the Empire's purges, children born with gifts they cannot understand. She teaches them what she has learned, not the rigid doctrines of the old order, but something more flexible, more adaptive. She speaks of the Jedi Reclamation, of the failure that taught her wisdom. Her students listen with wide eyes, absorbing both the lesson and the legend. When one of them asks if the Jedi will ever return, she smiles. The Jedi never left. We simply changed. And one day when the galaxy is ready, we will emerge again. Not to reclaim what was lost, but to build something new. The Emperor sits upon his throne, confident in his victory. He has crushed the Jedi, dissolved the Senate, extended his reach to every corner of the galaxy. He believes himself invincible, beyond challenge, beyond defeat. But in his arrogance, he has made the same mistake that destroyed the Jedi Order. The mistake of believing that the past determines the future. That what is will always be. Change is coming. It will not come quickly, and it will not come easily. But it is coming, as inevitable as the turning of stars. The failure of the Jedi Reclamation was not the end of hope. It was the beginning of something new, something forged in the fires of defeat, tempered by years of patience and sacrifice. The Empire stands supreme, but its foundations are built on fear, and fear is a poor foundation. One day that fear will give way to courage. One day the seeds planted in the aftermath of failure will blossom into revolution. One day the darkness will end. But that is a story for another time. For now, the survivors of the Reclamation go about their separate lives, carrying within them the lessons of their failure. Obi-Wan watches over Luke. Shakti trains her students. Quinlan Vos fights his guerrilla war. Bail Organa builds his rebellion. They do not coordinate, do not communicate, do not risk another grand gesture that might bring the Empire's wrath down upon them all. They have learned the value of patience, of working in the shadows, of waiting for the right moment. And somewhere in the Force, a balance waits to be restored. The Chosen One prophesied by ancient texts still lives, though he has become a monster in service to darkness. His son grows toward manhood, carrying within him the potential to redeem what was lost. The galaxy's suffering is not meaningless. It is a crucible, burning away the old, creating space for the new. The Jedi who died in the Reclamation did not die in vain. Their sacrifice revealed the truth of Palpatine's regime, demonstrated to the galaxy that there were still those willing to fight against tyranny. Their failure taught the survivors wisdom that success never could have taught. And their memory inspires those who come after, who hear whispered legends of warriors who fought against impossible odds and never surrendered, even in defeat. That is the nature of hope. It cannot be destroyed, only transformed. It cannot be crushed, only scattered like seeds on the wind. And those seeds, landing in fertile soil across 1,000 worlds, will one day grow into something the Empire cannot contain. The failure of the Jedi Reclamation was complete. But it was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would eventually lead to the destruction of the Empire and the restoration of balance to the Force. The road would be long and painful, marked by sacrifice and loss. But the destination was never in doubt. The light would return. It always does. In the days immediately following the Reclamation, the galaxy seemed darker than it had ever been. The HoloNet was saturated with Imperial propaganda, celebrating the defeat of the Jedi terrorists and the dissolution of the Senate. Citizens who had quietly sympathized with the Old Republic now fell silent, terrified of drawing attention to themselves. The few who dared to speak out were quickly silenced by Imperial security. But even in that darkness, there were moments of light. On a backwater world in the Outer Rim, a young girl watched the news of the Jedi attack with wide eyes. She had never seen a Jedi, had only heard stories from her grandmother about the Guardians who once protected the galaxy. But something about the footage stirred something inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Years later, she would join the rebellion, would fight and die for the freedom the Jedi had believed in. She would never know that her sacrifice helped pave the way for the Empire's defeat. On a space station orbiting a gas giant, an Imperial officer watched the same footage with growing unease. He had joined the military to protect people, to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. But what he saw in the propaganda, the dehumanization of the Jedi, the celebration of their deaths, it made him question everything he thought he knew. He began to ask questions, carefully, quietly. Eventually, those questions would lead him to the rebellion, where his knowledge of Imperial tactics would save countless lives. On Alderaan, a little girl named Leia watched her adopted father work late into the night, his face drawn with worry, his hands moving constantly over datapads and communication devices. She was too young to understand what he was doing, too young to know about the rebellion he was building. But she absorbed his values, his dedication to freedom, his willingness to sacrifice everything for what he believed in. One day, she would carry those values forward, would become a leader who inspired billions, would help bring down the empire that murdered her home world. These were small moments, insignificant in the grand sweep of galactic history. But they mattered. Every act of courage, every moment of defiance, every refusal to surrender to despair, they all added up. They all contributed to the eventual victory of the light over darkness. The Jedi who died in the Reclamation could not have known this. They went to their deaths believing they had failed, that their sacrifice had accomplished nothing. But they were wrong. Their courage inspired others. Their example lit a fire that would eventually consume the Empire. They planted seeds that would grow into forests. That is the true legacy of the failed Reclamation. Not defeat, but transformation. Not ending, but beginning. The Jedi Order of old was destroyed, yes. But from its ashes, something new was emerging. Something stronger. Something more resilient. Something that could not be crushed because it no longer depended on temples or hierarchies or political alliances. It depended only on the Force and on the beings who chose to follow its light. In the depths of the Executor, Darth Vader stands alone in his meditation chamber. The helmet is off, revealing the ruined face beneath, the scars of Mustafar that never fully healed. He thinks of Obi-Wan, of the man who was once his brother, who escaped once again despite everything. The hatred burns in him, but beneath it, something else stirs, something he has tried to bury, to destroy, to forget. He thinks of Padme. He thinks of the dreams he once had, of bringing peace to the galaxy, of being a hero rather than a monster. He thinks of the younglings he killed in the temple, their faces frozen in terror as his lightsaber fell. He tells himself it was necessary. He tells himself he had no choice. But in the silence of his meditation chamber, those words ring hollow. The Reclamation had forced him to confront things he had tried to forget. Fighting Obi-Wan again, standing in the temple where he had committed his greatest atrocities, it had stirred memories that he thought were dead. He remembered the boy he had been, the Padawan who dreamed of freeing slaves and bringing justice to the galaxy. He remembered Ahsoka, the apprentice he had trained and loved like a sister. He remembered all the friends he had betrayed, all the innocents he had killed, all the promises he had broken. Anakin Skywalker is dead, he tells himself. Darth Vader killed him, buried him beneath layers of pain and hatred and servitude. But the dead have a way of refusing to stay buried. And somewhere in the depths of his mechanical heart, a spark remains. Not of hope, not yet, but of memory, of what he once was and what he might have become. It is not enough to change him, not now, not yet. But it is there, waiting, patient as the Force itself. One day a voice will call to him from across the years, will remind him of who he truly is. One day his son will stand before him and refuse to give up hope, even in the face of certain death. One day that spark of memory will ignite into something greater, will burn away the darkness that has consumed him. And on that day, Anakin Skywalker will answer. But that is far in the future. For now, the Empire reigns supreme, and the darkness covers the galaxy like a shroud. The survivors of the Reclamation hide in the shadows, nursing their wounds, learning from their failures, preparing for a day that may never come. They do not know if they will live to see the dawn. They only know that they must keep fighting, keep hoping, keep believing that the light will return. Because that is what Jedi do. They endure. Through darkness and despair, through failure and loss, through every trial the universe can throw at them. They bend, but do not break. They fall, but rise again. They lose battles, but never lose faith. That is their strength, the thing that makes them more than mere warriors. They carry the light within them, and as long as that light burns, even the deepest darkness cannot truly win. The Reclamation taught them this truth. In seeking to reclaim their temple, their order, their past, they learned that the true Jedi way cannot be reclaimed because it was never lost. It lives in every act of compassion, every moment of courage, every refusal to surrender to hatred. It lives in the survivors who scattered to the far corners of the galaxy. It lives in the rebels who fight without knowing if they will ever see victory. It lives in a farm boy on Tatooine who stares at the stars and dreams of something more. The Emperor believes he has won. He believes the Jedi are finished, that their light has been extinguished forever. He is wrong. The light cannot be extinguished. It can only be hidden, suppressed, driven underground, but it always returns. It always finds a way. The twin suns of Tatooine set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Obi-Wan Kenobi stands on a ridge overlooking the Lars homestead, watching as Luke helps his uncle with the evening chores. The boy is strong, stronger than he knows. The Force flows through him like a river, waiting to be channeled, waiting to be unleashed. Not yet, Obi-Wan thinks. But soon. He has failed before. He may fail again. But failure is not the end. It is simply another step on the path, another lesson to be learned, another reason to keep going. The Reclamation taught him that. The years of exile have reinforced it. The Jedi Order as it was will never return. But the Jedi themselves, the principles they stood for, the light they carried, that can never truly die. It lives in every act of courage, every moment of compassion, every refusal to surrender to despair. It lives in the survivors of the Reclamation, scattered across the galaxy. It lives in the rebels who fight against impossible odds. And it lives in a farm boy on Tatooine who dreams of adventure and does not yet know that he is the galaxy's last hope. Obi-Wan allows himself a small smile. The failure of the Reclamation nearly broke him. But in the breaking, he found something new. A patience he never possessed before. A wisdom born of loss an understanding that the Force works in ways beyond mortal comprehension, and that even the darkest moments serve a purpose. He turns and walks back toward his small dwelling, his cloak billowing in the desert wind. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new dangers, new opportunities to serve the light. He will meet them as he has met everything else, with courage and with hope, because that is what Jedi do. And somewhere in the Force, the spirits of those who fell in the Reclamation watch over him. They do not regret their sacrifice. They know that their deaths were not meaningless, that the lessons learned from their failure will one day bear fruit beyond anything they could have imagined. They wait in the Force, patient as the stars, until the day when balance is finally restored. It will come. The Force wills it. And the Force, as Obi-Wan has learned through decades of study and suffering, is never wrong. The story of the Jedi Reclamation ends in failure. But the story of the Jedi themselves continues, an unbroken thread of light stretching from the ancient past to the distant future. Empires rise and fall. Darkness comes and goes. But the light endures. It always has. It always will. That is the true lesson of the Reclamation. Not that the Jedi failed, but that they survived. Not that they were defeated, but that they refused to give up. Not that the Empire won, but that the Empire's victory was hollow, built on a foundation that would one day crumble. The seeds are planted. The future is waiting. And somewhere in the galaxy, a new hope is growing. That is the power of the Force. That is the legacy of the Jedi. And that is why, despite everything, the darkness will never truly win. The story continues. It always does. That's our theory. The Star Wars universe is a galaxy filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey to a galaxy far, far away, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.